All right, good morning, everybody. We're back in the hot seat. It is a rainy, overcast spring day here in Maine, so the lighting might look a little different today, and that, that would be why. Uh, if you remember in the previous video, I showed how to connect to, I've got Ignition up here, but I showed you how to connect out to AWS IoT Core, right? So we were messing around showing how to connect HighByte in, create an MQTT input that connects out to IoT Core, then publish a message into IoT Core and pull that back in. And we dealt with the certificate management in those aspects. But what we ended up with is the ability to publish a message to IoT Core and the ability to have an input that when read, that message appears. So now we want to flush this use case out a little more. And what I want to show you is what you can do in terms of taking data from IoT Core, bringing that into HighByte, modeling it, and then pushing it back down, excuse me, to the SCADA system through Sparkplug. Now this is pretty cool. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change this message, right? Because this is just a test message. So I'm going to jump back to IoT Core and their test client. I'm going to copy over a use case that we see quite frequently, which is I've got some third-party sensor provider, right? That's got these LoRa-based or wireless sensors out in the field, and they're going to publish data up to IoT Core. I want to get that data, or maybe I'm looking for certain events, but in any case, I want to get that data back down into my SCADA system, either my Historian, my platform, my SCADA platform, so I could do things like alerting or just use the data in screens, etc. So we're going to mock up a very simple sensor, right? Sensor level battery. I'll publish that, and we'll see, that's available. So we got that connection working. So now I'm going to model this data. You don't necessarily have to. If the data model coming in is fine, you don't need to do this. But I'm going to model it, and I'm going to give it an ID. I'm going to give it a level in feet. We're still using English units over here in the US. And then lastly, what was the other thing? Battery percentage. All right, so we're going to mimic the payload. We're going to rename the fields a little bit. You could do much more than that, but keep it simple. And then what we're going to do is actually create an instance. So I'm going to call this tank 1. And in here, now that we've got that MQTT input set up, right, I can pull that down on the inputs and I can automatically see all the data that's available. So I'm just going to pull over sensor ID, the level, and the battery. And now we're wired up. So the last thing I'm going to do is create a connection to Sparkplug. Now Sparkplug is MQTT based, right? So I've just got a local Mosquito broker running on my machine. I'm going to do 127. 7.0.0.1 port 1883, and I'm going to give this, I need to give it a group ID. I'm just going to call it HighByte, and then I'm going to call the edge of node ID tanks, so when it appears in the address space, and then I'm going to create an output off of Sparkplug to push data into the Sparkplug namespace, and I'm not going to specify an ID or a metric, which basically means I want to push the entire thing down, and you'll see how this lands on the other side. So just use those wildcards, and I'm going to submit that. And the last thing I'm going to do is create a flow. Call it tanks flow. I'm going to grab the instance and pull it in. And then I'm going to grab the output to Sparkplug, tanks, and good. And so now when I enable this flow, I'm going to take that model, I'm going to push it into Sparkplug as the model definition. Now, I need something listening in Sparkplug. I get multiple applications listening, but specifically I'm going to use Ignition. And I've got Ignition hooked up with the MQTT engine module that's enabled, that's connected to the same broker, right? Listening for, I believe it's the MQTT engine model. Yeah, here we go. Mosquito, and I believe the namespace is Sparkplug B is enabled. Yep. So if I bring up the Ignition designer, in here, if I go to the MQTT engine, you'll see the data that's coming through. And right now, Sparkplug Motors is actually something I'm publishing. I have the transmitter on, so I'm publishing this out and then consuming my own, kind of eating my own dog food here. But the tanks don't appear yet, right? We haven't enabled that. So I'm going to jump back over and go out and actually turn this flow on. And now we're going to be taking that data model, pushing it out to Sparkplug, and Ignition, what's listening on Sparkplug, fingers crossed, should pick it up. And it does, right? So here's the HighByte group ID. There's the edge of node. And now we have tank 1. And look at that. Isn't that cool? We have the battery, ID, and percentage. And then if I jump back out to, oh no, they kicked me out. Pause the video. Oops. If you remember, it was 21, right? If I increment that to 22 and hit publish again, what you'll see if I jump back into Ignition, 22, right? It changes that quick. So this is really a simple example, right? You could expand upon this, but it's the idea that I've got third-party data coming into IoT Core, to the cloud, most likely sensor data. I'm going to pipe that back, hook that into HighByte, bring that data down, model it, and then push that data back into the SCADA system. So in this case, it's Ignition, could be OSI Soft, which is also Sparkplug enabled, could be Canary Labs, a number of other systems, now in the SCADA space that could listen in and pick up that model data. And HighByte is doing that translation and modeling the data so that all the data coming in through IoT Core is going to be modeled and consistently land in the SCADA system. So hopefully that's cool. We see that as a cloud to edge use case, and quite honestly, it's just as common as edge to cloud, which I was surprised to find. But it makes sense, right? You need bidirectional communication. If you have machine learning running in the cloud, you need to get messages and information back down to the factory floor, and you're going to do that most likely through the SCADA system, right? All that infrastructure is already there. So yeah, I think this is really cool. Hopefully you enjoyed it.